Don't sign that, it's fake. Waitress answers in perfect Italian and saves Mafia boss from a $500 million scam. Banano was seconds from signing away his empire when the quiet waitress behind him whispered in perfect Sicilian, words no outsider should know, and every man in the room reached for a gun. One phrase on the ancient decree was impossible, and she was the only one who saw it. What she exposed next didn't just ruin the deal. It exposed herself. Before we begin, take a second to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps bring powerful stories like this to life. Thank you. The night over Rome didn't simply glow, it shimmered warm and decadent, wrapping the Hotel Excelsior in the kind of golden light designed to ease the conscience of powerful men. Inside the private suite overlooking Via Veneto, the air was thick with quiet luxury. Velvet drapes that swallowed the outside world, crystal sconces diffusing honey-colored light, and a table set for titans who preferred to settle their business far from prying eyes. Arlene Brickman moved through this world like a shadow with a tray. At 32, she'd perfected the art of invisible service. Apron pressed sharp, burgundy vest smooth, every hair pinned flawlessly beneath a discreet cap. No wasted movements. No unnecessary sound. She poured water, adjusted cutlery, and vanished. A ghost among kings. Tonight, 3 figures commanded the room. On the left, a tattooed man in a perfectly tailored black suit, the kind of man whose stillness suggested he'd survived more ambushes than dinners. His eyes were cold, rational, and old, even if his face was not. This was Joe Bonanno, the patriarch who built his legend in America and maintained it in Sicily through sheer will. Across from him, Mumtaz Samir Fard, dressed in a pristine navy suit under a white keffiyeh, rings glinting like miniature suns. Smooth voice. Controlled confidence. Every gesture rehearsed. He was the kind of man who smiled as he lied and never blinked when he stole. Between them on the table lay the centerpiece of the night, a long sheet of aged vellum, its edges uneven, its surface marked with looping Latin scribbles and a crimson wax seal that looked older than stone. Arlene approached with a silver carafe, careful, silent. Bonanno uncapped the Mont Blanc pen placed beside the parchment. Fard folded his hands, smiling like a man moments from victory. And Arlene, supposed to be invisible, felt her stomach clench. Something was wrong. Not with the men. Not with the deal. Not with the tension humming like electricity between them. With the document. Her eyes brushed across a phrase near the lower margin. Only a fraction of a second, only a flicker, but it was enough. A sentence written in an Italian dialect that did not exist when this document was supposedly created. A sentence that should have been impossible. Her pulse quickened, barely. Her expression didn't change. Her hands never trembled. She continued filling Bonanno's glass as if nothing inside her had cracked open. Behind her, her manager's warning from an hour earlier still echoed. Primary service tonight. You will not interrupt. You will not speak. You will not exist. But the ink told a different story. And the ink had never lied to her. Bonanno lowered the pen. Fard leaned closer, smiling. Arlene inhaled once. She would break every rule. She would stop the signing. She would risk everything she'd spent years hiding. She stepped forward, slowly, deliberately, and her voice cut through the room in flawless Sicilian. Non firmarlo. È falso. Don't sign that. It's fake. The room froze. 3 men looked up at her. And for the first time in years, Arlene Brickman was no longer invisible. What Bonanno didn't know, not yet, was that Arlene had seen documents like this before. She'd studied them in smoky backrooms of New York, under the tutelage of men who trusted her only because they didn't fully understand what she was capable of. She'd learned how ink ages, how vellum cracks, how lies breathe inside old parchment. And she'd spent a decade burying the person who knew those things. Until tonight. The silence that followed Arlene's warning felt like a dropped curtain. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Bonanno's fingers hovered over the pen, his dark eyes narrowing at her as though he were recalibrating the world. Mumtaz Samir Fard didn't blink, but something about his jaw tightened, the smallest fracture in an otherwise polished marble mask. Arlene's pulse thrummed painfully at her throat. But the parchment, God, the parchment, still lay on the table between these men like a venomous jewel. The alleged papal decree worth $500 million. The artifact that could grant Bonanno's network a whispered influence over Vatican-adjacent territories, smuggling routes, and financial corridors older than the Mafia itself. Aged vellum. Crimson wax. Latin flourishes looping like tiny serpents across cream-colored skin. A perfect forgery. She knew it even before she stepped closer. Bonanno finally set the pen down with the slow, precise care of a man disarming a bomb. "Explain," he said. Not angry. Not surprised. Just assessing. It was Mumtaz who spoke first, his voice smooth like oiled marble. "My friend, the document is authenticated. Vatican traditions are very clear. This script, this wax stamp, these are relics of the 15th century papal offices. My experts." Arlene cut him a look that was almost pity. Experts. Gatekeepers. Elitists in tailored suits who used big words and layered jargon to intimidate anyone outside their little circle of self-worship. She forced her breathing to steady as she stepped forward. Her finger drifted to the lower corner of the vellum, careful not to touch, and she angled it toward the light. The ink caught a warm glimmer. There. The phrase again. A single sentence written in 15th century script, but using a Florentine grammatical structure that wouldn't emerge for another 300 years. Impossible. Like seeing Shakespeare tweet. Her stomach knotted. But outwardly, she was carved stone. Bonanno leaned back, watching her with the kind of stillness that meant she'd just become the most interesting person in the room. Mumtaz lifted his chin. "You are a waitress," he said coolly. "A server. You have no authority to question what scholars and archivists have verified." Arlene's eyes sharpened. "Comment, I stand for truth, if you refuse to be fooled by gatekeepers pretending to be experts," she murmured under her breath, almost like a prayer meant for the air alone. Because that's what he was. One of those men who used arrogance to steamroll truth. She raised her chin slightly. "May I show you something?" she said to Bonanno alone. "A beat. A long beat." He nodded. Arlene pointed toward the impossible sentence. This construction, this phrasing, didn't exist in the 1450s. This specific Florentine variation only appears in recorded text centuries later. It's like finding modern slang in a Roman inscription. Fard's eyes flashed hot. "You think you know better than historians?" No. She knew she did. And God help her, she knew why. The smell of cigarette smoke in a cramped New York backroom. A strip of vellum under a hanging yellow bulb. A mob captain leaning over her shoulder, rasping, "Ink lies more than men do. Make it bleed. Make it age. Know its tricks, or you'll die believing the wrong signature." Her teacher, Nico the scribe, hand stained dark with pigment as he rubbed the edge of genuine vellum between his calloused fingers. "Humidity tells secrets, kid. Old skin and new skin react different. Feel the fibers. Listen to them." A judge's gavel. A hallway of FBI agents avoiding eye contact. A plane ticket to Italy under someone else's name. She blinked, and the memories dissolved like smoke. Back in the suite, Mumtaz continued describing the decree with a scholar's rhythm. The origins, the papal blessing, the supposed transfer of lands. His voice was smooth, confident. Too confident. But Arlene wasn't listening. She was staring at the second, less decorative stack of papers beside the decree. The contract. Pages of clean, modern legalese that didn't match the antique romance of the parchment. Arbitration terms. Asset commitments. International jurisdiction clauses linking to shell corporations in Dubai and Malta. Her blood ran cold. That was the real trap. The parchment was the bait. The contract was the guillotine. If Bonanno signed it, he wasn't acquiring land rights. He was handing control of his global finances to whoever owned the arbitration courts behind that fine print. Mumtaz wasn't a relic hunter. He was an executioner. The room blurred a little at the edges. Arlene forced her breath slow, steady, silent. Bonanno's men began discussing territory, Vatican adjacency, underground corridors, how a centuries-old land grant could give leverage in areas modern governments still failed to regulate. They spoke in half-sentences and coded phrases, the language of men who built empires in shadows. Arlene heard none of it clearly. Her mind was spinning around the contract like a trapped moth. She felt the weight of her invisibility code pressing against her from all sides. Do not speak. Do not interrupt. Do not exist. But truth had its own gravity. Her palms felt cold. Her heartbeat echoed like a faint drum in her skull. She could stay silent and let a $500 million noose tighten around the neck of one of the most dangerous men alive. Or she could break every rule that kept her safe for years. Her heartbeat grew louder, pulsing in her ears. Bottom. 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 Bonanno reached for the pen again. Her breath caught. Inside her chest, her heartbeat struck once more. Deep, heavy, final. The chapter closed with that sound. Bonanno uncapped his pen with the slow reverence of a man preparing to sign history. The gold nib caught the chandelier's glow, throwing a thin blade of light across the room. Every breath in Palazzo Chigi seemed to pause. Even the air stilled, waiting, expecting, to witness $500 million move with a single signature. Mumtaz angled the parchment forward, the crimson wax seal facing the table like a priest offering a relic. His smile was patient, certain, almost smug. Bonanno lowered the pen. A hush rippled through the room. And that was when Arlene did the unthinkable. She stepped forward. A full step, past her invisible boundary, past the unspoken rules of the help, past the point of no return. The soft thud of her shoe on marble was louder than any shout. "Sir," one of the bodyguards warned, hand already drifting to his jacket. Arlene didn't blink, didn't tremble, didn't think about the consequences. Only the truth that threatened to claw its way out of her throat. She spoke 5 words. Clear. Steady. Fatal. Non firmalo. A falso. Don't sign it. It's fake. Silence detonated. Not the empty silence of confusion, but the sharp electric shock just before violence. The room froze in exquisite terror. Every head snapped toward her. Every muscle coiled. Then, chairs scraped. Hands flew to holsters. Someone cursed. Bonanno didn't move. His pen hovered above the contract like a suspended verdict. Only his eyes shifted, slowly, to her, cold and calculating. Mumtaz's jaw clenched so hard the tendons bulged. His mask of diplomatic composure cracked. A flicker of panic cut through the confidence. "What did she say?" one of the aides whispered. "She said the document is fake," another murmured, already retreating behind a curtain of denial. "Repeat it," Bonanno said quietly. Too quietly. The kind of quiet that promised consequences. Arlene's pulse thundered. She felt it in her mouth, her wrists, her skull. But she lifted her chin, her voice unchanged. "Non firmalo. A falso." "No," Bonanno said, leaning forward. "Say it again. But slower. And in whatever tongue you think I won't understand." His challenge was deliberate. A trap. A test of legitimacy. Arlene held his gaze. Then she switched dialects with surgical precision. "Non lu fermari. A na truffa." Pure Sicilian, accent flawless, cadence perfect, like she'd been born on the same volcanic soil as Bonanno's ancestors. That was when chaos erupted. 2 bodyguards lunged, shoving her against a marble pillar. Another grabbed her wrist, searching for weapons she didn't have. A 4th radioed in rapid Italian, voice sharp with urgency. Arlene didn't struggle. She'd been handled like this before, in the backrooms of New York, when forged debts and counterfeit artwork sent men into blind panic. This was familiar. Almost nostalgic. "What did you see?" one guard barked in her face. "She's lying to sabotage the deal," someone else snapped. She couldn't possibly know, she's staff. Mumtaz stepped forward, composure strained. This is nonsense, he hissed. She's making an outrageous accusation against a document verified by experts, real experts. Oh really? A bystander muttered. Experts. The echo of doubt rippled like a weak tremor. If you believe people should have the courage to speak the truth, even when it's dangerous, hit like. Only cowards look away. It wasn't shouted aloud, just a sentiment that hung in the narrative atmosphere, the silent moral test of the moment. A judgment on everyone watching. And doing nothing. Arlene's breathing slowed. Not out of calm, but strategy. She needed oxygen. She needed clarity. She needed to survive. Because what she'd seen on that parchment wasn't small. Not trivial. Not speculative. A single phrase, 6 words in flowing ink, written in Florentine Italian, a dialect that did not exist in the 1450s. A linguistic impossibility. A historical fracture point. Proof of fabrication so bold and stupid it almost insulted her. But she couldn't explain that yet. Not pinned. Not surrounded. Not with guns half drawn. One wrong word and she'd become the liability. Disposable, ignorable, silenced. The contract, she realized, was the true weapon here. A trap dressed as paperwork. Something binding, something dangerous, something that would make Bonanno vulnerable once his signature landed. They didn't need the decree to be real. They just needed him to believe it long enough to sign the real document beside it. Her chest tightened. Should she intervene further? Should she push the truth harder? Or stay silent and survive? Her entire upbringing, every rule she'd lived by, screamed the same command. Be invisible or be dead. But the lie in that parchment was too loud, too clumsy, too reckless. And she had been trained, unwillingly, violently, meticulously, to see these things. A mob captain's fist slamming ink into her hands. A forger teaching her how vellum curls under humidity. Lessons taught in backrooms thick with cigar smoke and threats. Lessons that had brought her here. Pinned. Accused. Seen. Bonanno finally stood. The bodyguards froze mid-motion. He approached Arlene slowly, his shadow stretching across her like an omen. When he stopped in front of her, the room held its breath all over again. Ragazza, he murmured, you just interrupted a $500 million transaction. You accused a diplomat. You risked your life. So. He lifted a finger and touched the edge of the parchment, eyes locked on hers. Show me what you saw. Her heartbeat slammed against her ribs. Thud, thud, thud. And everything went black at the edge of the chapter. For a long moment, Bonanno said nothing. Just watched her, the way a surgeon studies an open wound, assessing the depth, the damage, the truth. Show me, he repeated. Arlene inhaled slowly. Her wrists were still partially restrained, but with a nod from Bonanno the guards released her. She didn't step away from them. The heat of their suspicion stayed at her back like a second skin. But she moved forward, toward the table. Toward the parchment. Mumtaz folded his arms, expression carved from marble. This is ridiculous, he announced. She is a staff member. Not an archivist. Not a linguist. Not an expert of any kind. Bonanno didn't look at him. Let her speak. That was all she needed. Arlene reached for the parchment, not touching it yet, just examining it under the chandelier's filtered light. A slow calm unfurled in her. This space, this scrutiny, this dissection of forgery, this was where she lived. Where the old training returned like muscle memory. Her voice, when it came, was steady. First, she said, the ink. Everyone leaned in. She angled the page slightly. This mixture is iron gall ink, but the ratio is off. Higher iron sulfate content than gallnut, something that didn't appear until the 1650s. That's impossible, Mumtaz snapped. The document is dated 1453. Exactly. Arlene finally touched the edge, gliding her finger near, but not on, the script. Whoever made this tried aging the ink with heat and humidity, but they didn't replicate the medieval proportions. They used a recipe from a century too late. Mumtaz's nostrils flared. Banano nodded once. Continue. Arlene turned the parchment. Her fingertip hovered over a specific line. Second problem, this. The room crowded closer. That phrase, per mandato della Santa Cosa, was written in early Florentine Italian, a dialect that didn't exist yet in 1450. Not this form. Not this conjugation. It didn't appear until nearly 100 years later in documented manuscripts. A ripple of whispers moved through the room. Coincidence. Mumtaz barked. A poetic flourish, nothing more. Arlene ignored him. The truth was flowing too freely now. Third issue, she said, flipping the parchment to show its faint underside. The Vatican watermark looks aged, but the design itself? It's from a batch stolen in 2008 from the papal archives. They've been turning up in black market vellum sales ever since. Banano's brows lifted, an expression that meant he'd heard about it. And that it mattered. Arlene wasn't done. Not even close. She lifted the document toward the light. Fourth, modern interference. There are laser-etched cellulose fibers embedded in the vellum. They tried to mimic natural animal skin fibers, but the grid pattern is unmistakable under refracted light. She tilted it again. There it was. The faint, artificial shimmer. Laser-etched. One of the guards murmured. Who the hell uses laser-etched fibers on a fake from the 1400s? Someone who doesn't understand history, Arlene said. But understands profit. Mumtaz stepped forward, palms slamming onto the table. Enough of this absurd fantasy. You're humiliating yourself. A waitress? Claiming forensic expertise. Arlene finally looked at him. Really looked. Calm. Cool. Surgical. Then explain the fifth flaw, she said. The wax seal. She held up the parchment so the red seal caught the light. The edges were wrong. Too crisp, too uniform. This mold is only used in tourist replicas of Vatican decrees. You can buy it from a stall outside Castel Sant'Angelo for €20. A laugh, short, shocked, escaped someone near the door. Mumtaz's face went red, then purple. This is outrageous. She's inventing, misrepresenting. Quiet, Banano said. It wasn't loud. It wasn't emotional. But it cut through the room like a blade dipped in ice. Arlene swallowed. The adrenaline in her veins shifted, from fear to focus. Her entire forensic skill set unfurled like she was back in those dim New York backrooms. Ink-aging tricks taught with threats. Vellum tests conducted under flickering bulbs. Lessons paid for in bruises and silence. She hadn't moved like this in years. And Banano saw it. He watched every detail, every breath, every choice she made, not with softness, but with sharpened age. His eyes were old enough to detect nonsense, but alive enough to recognize precision. Go on, he said. Arlene picked up the second document. The contract. Not the showpiece. Not the decoy. The real trap. This, she said softly, is where the real danger is. Mumtaz stiffened. Arlene unfolded the multi-page agreement. The legal language alone made her skin crawl. Hidden in Section 7, she continued, is a clause about arbitration. It sounds harmless, but the courts named here don't exist as independent entities. She looked up. They're controlled by shell companies in Dubai and Malta. Fronts with no transparency, no oversight, no accountability. Banano leaned closer, jaw tightening. Arlene tapped the paragraph. If you sign this contract, every dispute, including disagreements about property, assets, and territorial influence, gets decided by their organizations. Which means... Her voice lowered. Deadly. You'd be legally forfeiting control of your entire empire. No one spoke. No one breathed. Mumtaz's mask cracked, just for a second. A tremor of rage, a flicker of panic. His eyes darted to his briefcase. The room noticed. If you hate manipulators who weaponize lies, comment, "Not today." Only the fraudulent stay silent. Mumtaz's composure finally collapsed. "You insolent little." His hand shot toward the briefcase. Banano lifted one finger. One simple gesture. "Search his briefcase." The guards moved instantly, lunging, grabbing, ripping it from Mumtaz's hands as he lurched forward in protest. The locks snapped open. Documents spilled out. And what they found. The briefcase hit the table with a heavy thud, spilling its contents like a confession. Papers slid across the marble. Contracts, maps, sealed folders. But it was the smallest item that stopped everyone cold. A black USB drive. Unmarked. Too ordinary to be innocent. One of the guards plucked it up with gloved fingers. "Boss, you'll want to see this." Banano didn't touch it. He nodded toward his tech man, who had already wheeled in a portable terminal. The drive was inserted. Files bloomed across the screen. And the temperature of the room dropped. Pre-written arbitration rulings. Each one stamped, prepared, dated for future disputes that hadn't even happened yet. Asset seizure plans. Detailed. Sequential. Ruthless. Outlining exactly how to dismantle Banano's empire piece by piece. Territorial maps. Color-coded overlays of Sicily, the Amalfi Coast, Naples, parts of Rome. Each region labeled according to which strategic partner would absorb it after Banano's downfall. The men around the table stiffened. The guards stepped in closer. And for the first time, someone whispered the obvious. This was never about a decree. Arlene felt her pulse slow, not in fear, but focus. A strange calm pooled inside her, as if her nerves had gone silent to let her mind sharpen. Mumtaz's composure finally snapped. He lunged, not for a gun, not for an escape route, but for the parchment itself, the worthless fake he had tried to crown with legitimacy. He grabbed at it with frantic desperation, as if destroying the evidence would undo the truth unraveling around him. A hand flashed to a holster. Steel glinted. "Stop," a guard barked. But Mumtaz didn't. The gun came out. Two guards slammed him to the marble with brutal efficiency, his face smearing across his own scattered papers. Someone kicked the briefcase away. His frantic breaths hitched into a strangled protest. "Unhand me. You have no right, no right. You forfeited that 10 minutes ago," a guard spat. Arlene stood still, watching. And what startled her most wasn't the violence. It was her reaction. The calm. The utter absence of shock. Why am I not shaking? Why do I recognize this? The answer slid up from the dark corners of her past, uninvited. A windowless room. Fluorescent lights. A styrofoam cup of burnt coffee. And across from her, an FBI handler with tired eyes. "You're doing good work, Arlene," he said. "Brickman trusts you. Keep your head down. Keep listening. We'll pull you out when it's time." But they didn't pull her out. Not when the threats started. Not when Brickman got suspicious. Not when she found the dead canary on her fire escape, its throat slit, a message carved into the wood beneath it. She ran. Not from justice. From the people who claimed to provide it. Italy was supposed to be invisible. Quiet. Safe. She used a false name. Burned every connection. Buried her skills under the uniform of a hotel attendant. But here she was, exposing a $500 million scam in front of crime lords and diplomats like it was second nature. "Maybe you didn't escape the old life," a voice whispered inside her. "Maybe you just paused it." A guard slammed Mumtaz's wrists together, cuffing him. The diplomat's face was crimson, twisted with rage and humiliation. "You, You don't know what you're interfering with, he hissed. Banano ignored him. Instead, he turned to Arlene. The room went quiet again, not the violent kind, but the calculating kind. He studied her like she was a puzzle with one missing piece. Not prey. Not threat. Something rarer. A riddle. You saw things, he said softly. Things even my own men missed. Arlene steadied her breath. Anyone trained in document forensics would have noticed. He smiled, not kindly. Who trained you? Her fingers curled slightly. It doesn't matter. It matters to me. His voice was gentle, which only made it more dangerous. And why? Banano continued. Are you hiding? Her throat tightened. I'm not hiding. Lies, he said warmly. Good lies. Clean ones. Polished. But lies. Mumtaz thrashed uselessly against the guards. She's a plant. She's working with someone. Banano raised a hand. Silence snapped shut. He kept his eyes on Arlene. Who trained you? He asked again. She held her ground. I won't say. Then, Banano murmured, leaning in just enough for only she to hear. That is your answer. A shiver slid through her. Not fear, not attraction. Something far more complicated. If you're sick of powerful people using money to hurt others, subscribe now. Only tyrants wouldn't. Banano straightened. He looked at the USB drive, the maps, the forged decree, the panicked diplomat pinned to the floor. And then he looked back at Arlene. As if the real mystery wasn't the scam. It was her. Take him away, he ordered his men, jerking his chin at Mumtaz. And bring me every file connected to this operation. The guards obeyed instantly, dragging Mumtaz across the floor as he flailed and screamed accusations. But Banano stayed where he was, watching Arlene, reading her like a coded manuscript. And when he finally spoke, it was with quiet certainty. We're not done, he said. But his eyes added something else, something far more dangerous. Not even close. The study was silent except for the soft hum of the encrypted terminal. Banano leaned back in his leather chair while two of his men worked, one at the computer, one combing through international records, visa logs, tax filings, anything with a footprint. It didn't take long for the tension to thicken. Boss, the tech finally said. There's nothing. Banano didn't look surprised. Define nothing. No employment history. No aliases. No medical files. No school registrations. No known relatives. Not even a tax record. Just a passport issued under her current name, 4 years old, clean. The other man added quietly, too clean. Banano steepled his fingers. People with nothing are usually hiding something. He nodded toward the door. Bring her in. Arlene entered with the stiff posture of someone who'd been bracing for this. She kept her arms folded, shoulders tight, eyes scanning the room like a chessboard. You wanted to see me? She asked. Banano didn't answer. He simply tilted the monitor toward her. A blank profile stared back. Her name, her age, her photo, and nothing else. No history, Banano said softly. No past. You don't exist before 4 years ago. Arlene's pulse stuttered, but she kept her expression neutral. I moved around a lot, she said. People who move around leave shadows, Banano replied. You. Not even footprints. She swallowed. He watched her closely. So I'll ask one more time. What are you hiding? Arlene exhaled. Slowly. Controlled. I used to know people who dealt in documents, she said. People who forged, replicated, traded. I learned things I shouldn't have. When it got dangerous, I left. That's all. It was a partial truth. A safe truth. One that explained everything without revealing anything. But Banano just smiled. Not warm. Not cruel. Knowing. You're lying. The words didn't sting, because they were expected. What chilled her was the tone. A man who had already solved the puzzle and was now watching her pretend it was still scrambled. He rose from his chair. "You see," he said, pacing slowly, "I've been listening to whispers a long time. Officers talk. Detectives gossip. Even the FBI has leaks when the right pressure is applied." Her fingers tightened around her elbow. "And years ago," Bonanno continued, "there was a name floating through certain corridors. A name tied to a confidential asset inside a small New York ring. Someone valuable. Someone who disappeared." He stopped in front of her. "Brickman." Arlene's breath froze. He saw it, the flicker, the panic she tried to bury. He didn't press closer. He didn't have to. The truth hovered in the air between them. Undeniable. "So you know." Her voice was low. "I know enough," Bonanno said. "Enough to understand why the FBI hid you. Why you ran. And why someone like you would rather fold bedsheets in a Rome hotel than ever be found again." Arlene felt the floor tilt under her. Memories she'd buried began slamming against her ribs. A basement bar in Queens. Stale beer. The smell of fear. Brickman, a mid-level enforcer with a broken nose and a love for counterfeit currency, had trusted her, because she played small, quiet, forgettable. She poured drinks. She laughed when expected. She listened. The FBI didn't need her to fight. They needed her to hear. "You're a ghost," her handler told her once. "That's your power." Until the day the ring collapsed. Until she testified in the racketeering case. Until Brickman turned in his seat at the courthouse and whispered, loud enough for her to hear, "I'll find you, little ghost." The death threats came next. Letters shoved under her door. Shadows that lingered too long at the corner of the block. So she vanished. Crossed the ocean. Started over. Invisible again. Safe, she thought. Arlene blinked hard, pulling herself back into the present. "I don't work with law enforcement anymore," she said quietly. "I don't work with any side. I just survived. That's it." Bonanno studied her with the unnerving patience of a man who'd spent his life reading lies like scripture. Then he said something she didn't expect. "Everyone lies to survive." He shrugged lightly. "I respect that." Arlene remained silent. "If you can't stand two-faced people who pretend to be saints, hit like hypocrites won't." Bonanno turned toward the city lights spilling through the window. "You're interesting, Arlene," he said. "Too interesting to release. Too dangerous to ignore. Too skilled to let vanish again." She stiffened. "What does that mean?" He turned back to her, eyes sharp with decision. "It means I want you close." "Close," she echoed. "Close enough to talk," he said. "Close enough for me to understand why someone like you shows up in my world with skills you shouldn't have, instincts you shouldn't know, and a past you refuse to claim." Her heart thudded once, hard. "And where exactly," she asked carefully, "would this conversation happen?" A slow smile spread across his face. "Sicily." She inhaled sharply. "Why Sicily?" "Because that," Bonanno said, "is where truths and ghosts tend to surface." He stepped closer, not touching her, but close enough that she felt the gravity of him. "I'm inviting you," he said. "A courtesy." Her voice was steady, but her stomach tightened. "And if I decline?" He didn't blink. "You won't." Silence stretched. Not threatening. Not warm. Something in between, like a man who had already decided the direction of the wind. Finally, Bonanno stepped back. "Pack a bag," he said. "We leave at dawn." A command disguised as an invitation. And the beginning of something far more dangerous than any forgery. Something she couldn't outrun. Not this time. Arlene didn't see the jet until she was practically beneath it. Matte black, unmarked, idling on a private runway outside Rome. No logos, no tail number, nothing to tie it to any nation or criminal. Just two men in charcoal suits standing at the base of the stairs, waiting like shadows carved from the night. "Miss Brickman," one said with a slight bow, using the name she'd prayed no one in Europe would ever speak again. "Mr. Bonanno is expecting you." Her stomach tightened. The flight was silent except for the low hum of engines and the quiet war between panic and resolve in her chest. Sicily glimmered below after an hour, jagged coastline, black mountains, the city of Palermo lighting up like gold dust scattered across stone. Beautiful. Deadly. The jet touched down with the softness of a whisper. A car, long, dark, presidential, waited at the hangar. No license plates. No driver who spoke a word. As they drove through narrow streets, she recognized landmarks she'd only ever seen in photos attached to case files. The lion's den wasn't metaphor anymore. She was here. The villa sat high on a cliff overlooking the Tyrrhenian Sea. Bonanno stood on the terrace, his back turned, hands clasped behind him. He didn't greet her with guns or shouting. He didn't have to. Power radiated from him like heat. "Arlene," he said, her name rolling off his tongue like he'd been practicing it. "Come. We talk." She followed him inside. No interrogation room. No chains. Instead, a long wooden table, a single lamp, and a stack of documents 3 inches high. Respectful, yes. But an interrogation all the same. He gestured. "Sit." She did. Bonanno opened the first folder. "Do you know what your little discovery in Rome exposed?" She swallowed. "A scam. A big one." "A scam that triggered an Interpol sting," he corrected softly. "That alerted a Middle Eastern syndicate that my family is vulnerable. That encouraged 2 rival clans to move pieces on the chessboard while they think I'm distracted." He leaned back in his chair, studying her face. "Do you understand the consequences of a single forged ledger in my world?" She nodded. "Yes." "Good. Then show me." He slid a fresh ledger toward her, another attempt at cooking numbers, but more sophisticated, more dangerous. Arlene exhaled slowly, pulled the book closer, and let instinct take over. She cracked it open. Her mind sharpened. Wrong ink density on line 6. Codes using Sicilian dialect from the eastern side. Never mixed with the western unless someone was faking. A shipment date that was impossible because the port had been shut down that week for a political protest. She dismantled it line by line, calmly, cleanly. Bonanno's expression shifted, subtle but unmistakable. Approval. Then he pushed another book toward her. This one older, thicker, written entirely in coded Sicilian shorthand used only by families who hadn't trusted digital systems for half a century. "This," he said, "is a conversation between dead men. Can you read it?" Arlene hesitated, then flipped it open. And the ghosts spoke. Not literally, but the ink told stories. Routes disguised as confessions. Names hidden in metaphors. Money flows buried in church references. Within minutes she was translating. Bonanno watched, unmoving, except for one small shift when she decoded a page in perfect rhythm, without stopping. Respect. Reluctant. Growing. "You saved me in Rome," he finally said. "But you also exposed yourself." She tensed. He lifted her chin with 2 fingers, not threateningly, but like he was examining truth itself. "You think I cannot see fear? You think I do not recognize someone running from ghosts?" His eyes softened. "I know what you are, Arlene. A woman who survived wolves by learning to bite harder." She pulled back slightly. "I'm not working for you." "No," he said. "You will work with me." The distinction felt like a collar gilded in gold. He stood, pacing slowly around the table. "I can protect you from the people who want you dead. From the ones you testified against. From the ones who remember your father. From those who know the name Brickman." Her pulse hammered. He wasn't threatening. He was stating a fact. A dangerous, undeniable fact. "But protection," he added, "comes at a price." She lifted her chin. "What price?" You help me rebuild what others tried to break. You help me read lies. You help me unmask traitors hiding behind holy faces. You be my eyes where others blind me. She stared at him. And if I say no? He shrugged lightly. Then you walk out that door. I will not harm you. But the world outside. He shook his head. It will eat you. And you know it. Silence flooded the room. The sea crashed below the cliff. The villa lights flickered. Her heartbeat sounded like footsteps in an empty hallway. Bonanno moved closer, lowering his voice. One last question, he said. Did you come to me in Rome to save me, or to save yourself? She didn't answer. Couldn't. Because the truth was tangled somewhere between survival and something she refused to name. He nodded once, as if her silence confirmed everything. Then the one thing you need now, he concluded, is someone who knows how to tame lions. He offered his hand. Work with me, Arlene. And I promise, you will never run alone again. She stared at that hand, at the choice, at the cliff beneath her feet. And slowly, because the world outside would devour her, she placed her hand in his. The lion's den closed around her like velvet. And for the first time since New York, she wondered if she had just stepped into safety, or into the jaws. The villa was older than any cathedral Arlene had ever stepped inside. Older, maybe, than half the secrets buried beneath it. Dawn light filtered through tall arched windows as she walked its silent corridors, escorted by no one, yet watched by everyone. Her footsteps echoed over ancient marble. Her breath fogged slightly in pockets of cold air, cold that came not from drafty stone, but from something underneath. Rooms unfolded around her like chapters in a forbidden book. A library with floor-to-ceiling archives, boxes labeled in code, dates that matched eras of war, folders tied with red string that meant blood in certain circles. A weapons room disguised as a wine cellar, barrels that slid apart on hidden tracks, revealing rifles lined up like soldiers sleeping on their feet. Their metal gleamed faintly, untouched, waiting. She paused, shivering. A vault-like office containing old ledgers written in dialects spanning generations. Sicilian, Neapolitan, Calabrian, coded hybrids only used when alliances were fragile. The villa was a museum of influence, a mausoleum of violence. And now, apparently, her workplace. She found Bonanno standing on a balcony overlooking the sea, a cigarette smoldering between two fingers though he rarely smoked. He watched her without turning. So, he said, do you understand what this place is? A fortress, she replied. A truth engine, he corrected. And I want you to be its heart. Arlene stiffened. I didn't agree to anything yet. He finally turned, exhaling smoke into the morning air. Then let's discuss. He led her into a room with a long wooden table and 3 objects placed neatly in the center. A clean contract, a vintage fountain pen, and a glass of water. It felt ceremonial. Or dangerous. Bonanno stood at the head of the table like a magistrate. What I need, he began, is not a soldier. Not a lieutenant. Not a consigliere. He tapped the contract lightly. I need a ghost. She frowned. What does that even mean? A ghost advisor, he said. Someone who does not exist on paper. Someone who sees truth when everyone else sees lies. Someone whose mind can slice through 1,000 stories and find the one thread that kills us, or saves us. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. You already do this. You did it in Rome. You did it tonight with those ledgers. You read the world like others read the weather. Her pulse quickened, not with pride, never pride, but with the old familiar dread of being seen too clearly. I'm not joining the Mafia, she said evenly. Good, he replied. I don't want you in it. I want you behind it. Quiet. Invisible. Untouchable. She backed away a step. What you're describing is still involvement. What I'm offering, he countered, is survival. The room went still. Arlene's gaze dropped to the contract on the table. Blank signature line. No official letterhead. No legal jurisdiction anywhere on Earth. A contract that could protect her, or bury her. She exhaled slowly. If I say no? Bonanno's tone softened, almost regretful. The men you testified against in New York will find you. The syndicate from Dubai already has your alias flagged. And the two families waiting for me to fall. He shook his head. They'll hunt anything connected to me. Including you. It wasn't a threat. It was an obituary waiting for a date. Arlene steadied her voice. If I consider this, I have terms. He raised an eyebrow. Name them. No violence, she said instantly. I won't plan it, approve it, or help hide it. Accepted. No assassinations. No revenge hits. He nodded. Accepted, though I may need to discuss how literal you intend that. No involvement in operations. I analyze documents, financial trails, and legal loopholes. That's it. Accepted, he said again. No hesitation. Arlene blinked. She hadn't expected him to agree so easily. And my last condition, she said softly. I can walk away if it becomes too much. Bonanno's jaw tightened a fraction. You may ask to walk away. Whether it is safe will depend on circumstances. She expected as much. He picked up the contract, skimmed it, then placed it back down with deliberate calm. These terms, he said, are reasonable. You seek to protect your conscience. I respect that. Then he leaned in, eyes steady. But remember, Arlene, truth itself is never clean. The words hit her harder than she wanted to admit. Truth had ruined her life once. Truth had driven her out of New York. Truth had dragged her into Sicily. And now truth was becoming her job. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for the pen. She sat, let the weight of every mistake and every survival instinct settle over her like a cloak, and stared at the signature line. Not loyalty. Not trust. Not belief in him. Just survival. Just survival. She signed. When she pushed the contract back toward him, Bonanno didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He simply folded the paper with quiet finality, as though sealing her fate required no celebration. Welcome, Arlene, he said softly. The villa is yours. The truth is yours. And the enemies you fear. His eyes darkened. They are mine now. A chill rippled down her spine. She wasn't sure if she had just secured her future, or surrendered it entirely. But the ink was dry. The pen was down. And the lion's den had accepted her. A ghost at last. The villa was quiet now, almost reverent. Moonlight spilled across the marble floors, catching the edges of antique weapons mounted like silent sentinels. Arlene moved slowly, her eyes tracing corridors she hadn't noticed before. Hidden alcoves, archives stuffed with documents, and behind one carved oak panel, a small armory. Bonanno followed her silently, hands clasped behind his back. Most people walk through this place without seeing anything, he said, voice low. You see too much. Arlene stopped in front of a tall cabinet, her fingers brushing the surface. I just know when something's wrong, she admitted. He smiled faintly, a shadow of amusement on his face. Wrong is an understatement, ragazza. The world was one step away from a war. Not between countries. Between families, companies, entire fortunes seized overnight. Her stomach dropped. Because of me? No. Because of what you stopped. Bonanno leaned against the doorway, eyes dark. If you hadn't spoken, we'd all be dead or arrested within a week. That call you answered, the words you said, the truth you exposed, they prevented a chain reaction no one else could have. Arlene's pulse quickened. A global mafia war? A war of a different sort, he corrected. An empire built on lies, greed, and violence. And you You pulled the lever that stopped it from toppling the wrong way. She swallowed hard, feeling the weight of every life she'd unknowingly protected. She, a waitress, invisible for so long. And now, powerful, feared, yet unseen by the world that mattered most. Bonanno gestured to the far end of the room. I can't offer safety in your old life. Too many eyes, too many hunters. But I can give you a future. Arlene's eyes followed his hand. On the table lay passports, digital access keys, and a small envelope stamped with an insignia she didn't recognize. A new identity, he said. Resources. A safe house. And this, he tapped the envelope, your new office. A place where you decide who sees truth and who doesn't. Her lips parted. I don't even know what to say. Say nothing, Bonanno said, stepping closer. Just accept it. You earned it. You are no longer invisible. No longer hiding. No longer powerless. Arlene walked to the balcony, hands resting on the wrought iron railing. The city below twinkled with oblivious lights. For years she had blended in, watching, unheard. Now she understood the weight of sight, and of silence. You'll never understand, Bonanno murmured from behind her. How many would have killed to silence one waitress? You are extraordinary. She let the words sink in. Extraordinary. Dangerous. Necessary. She had always feared being too small, too insignificant. Now she was indispensable. Bonanno's voice softened. The world's full of liars, ragazza. And I need someone who sees truth. Arlene nodded, feeling a strange calm settle over her. A life of fear was over. The horizon was hers to shape. He extended a hand, then paused, as if reconsidering. Instead, he left her with one final truth. Remember, not everyone wants to see it. Most will scroll past corruption, will look away from injustice. But some of us, we need people like you. Arlene took a deep breath, letting the wind carry away every doubt. She stepped back from the balcony, turned, and walked into the villa's newly furnished office. The walls were lined with screens, files, and books, a private command center for someone who wielded information like a weapon, and a shield. The door clicked closed behind her. Silence fell. But it was the kind of silence that promised beginnings. Outside, the city continued, unaware. Inside, Arlene's new life had begun. A final voice, echoing in the space between them. If you believe the world needs more people like Arlene, people who expose corruption instead of joining it, subscribe now. Only the corrupt will scroll past. And with that, she turned to her screens, her hands steady, her mind sharp. The war she had stopped was over. The real work had just begun.